Education opens doors for the gospel, bringing hope to dark places and sparking lasting change around the world. At Teach Beyond, we're reaching the nations through education.
This is Transformed and Transformational, a podcast from Teach Beyond. I'm Kian.
And I'm Heather. We're exploring how the gospel transforms us and overflows to impact classrooms, communities, and the world.
Let's jump into today's conversation.
Today, we're talking with Zoe and Chris Fletcher, who serve at the International Christian School of Budapest in Hungary. They're in their 10th year of living and working in Hungary.
Zoe studied elementary education with a middle school endorsement in the United States, and Chris initially studied engineering in the UK, then pursued a postgraduate diploma in secondary math education.
In this conversation, we'll hear about the impact of their school, Chris's growing up experiences that shaped his perspective on cross-cultural living, a powerful moment that led Zoe to move to Hungary, and how they aim to live open-handedly following the Lord.
Let's go over to our conversation now.
Welcome to the podcast, Chris and Zoe.
Thank you very much.
Hi, we are so excited to have you guys, and we have a lot to hear, a lot of your story to hear. But just to get us started, I would love for you to tell us about where you work. You work at the International Christian School of Budapest in Hungary. Can you tell us what your current roles are at the school?
So I'm a teacher in the high school. I teach math and chemistry, and also a Bible class about biblical masculinity. So that's my current job, is just being a full-time teacher.
Mm-hmm. And when I originally came to ICSB, I came to teach middle school history, then transitioned to middle school science. I did that for 3 years. And then for 2 years, I was working just part-time with the new teachers, training new teachers and just kind of guiding them through that process of adjusting to international school life at our school specifically. But I'm currently home with our kids, so I'm not teaching at the school. I would love to be back, but not yet.
As a former middle school teacher myself, I love that you guys have invested in that age group, and I have so many questions just even about the roles that you have had and do have now. Zoe, I'm curious for you, that role of kind of orienting the new teachers and all that. Is that something that you knew was a passion of yours, like helping other people into something new before you were in that role, or was that something you kind of discovered along the way?
I think for me, it was maybe the only thing that I could still do and feel connected to the school. With just having babies and being busy, I knew obviously I couldn't commit to teaching a class or being there every day, but I knew that my heart was in the classroom still, and if I could help new teachers feel like they could hit the ground running and feel confident with their classes, even just with a minimal, I was working 2 hours a week. So it was truly minimal. But it was exciting to hear how they were saying that it meant a lot to them to have somebody that they could ask questions from. And it was someone on the outside instead of asking, another staff who is overwhelmed with their own class and their own issues, or the principal who then, maybe
like the supervisor relationship.
Yeah, like a supervisor role, where they might, hit you down a couple notches if you ask a question like, what do you mean you don't know that you're supposed to do this? What do you mean you don't know what standards are? For me, I think it was more like, this is a way for me to continue to be connected and keep my brain engaged. I know I don't want to leave the classroom for good, so this is a way that I can maybe keep reading articles or keep pushing in a little bit. So that's been really good for me.
Yeah, that's great. And Chris, tell us more about the Bible class that you teach. Is that something that you developed, or how did that come about?
Yeah, so actually about 3 years ago, the principal decided the second semester to ask the teachers of the school if they'd consider teaching a Bible class. We have a range of different teachers: English specialists, math specialists, language specialists. And not many of us have been to Bible school, but it's something shared among the high school staff, is that they love the Bible, they love Jesus, and so he asked us to consider teaching an area of interest to us. And so this is something that I've been reading about and thinking about, and it's really a passion of mine to disciple young men on top of teaching, just to really, I don't know, have conversations of faith with them. So it was an easy choice for me, and it definitely adds to our workload as teachers. We take on an extra class in the last semester, but it's been great, and it's a very different way to teaching. Where in math, it's like the answer is x equals 4, whereas this is there's no clear answer, but I love the discussions and the opportunities we get from that. So yeah, it's been great.
That's so interesting. That class sounds fascinating, and the ability to kind of teach those classes to high school kids is a really unique thing. I'm curious to hear more about your school. Can you tell us about what is unique about ICSB? What drew you to work there? Kind of what does that place look like?
I don't know. I think, every international school is unique in itself. But also it's kind of like, well, how is ICSB different than, I don't know, other Christian international schools around the world? And I haven't visited those, so I can't tell you much about that. But I do know that probably our students would say that it's the staff who truly love them, care about them. They're there to teach and to disciple and to love on the students. And then for me, just the draw, I actually did my student teaching or part of it at ICSB. And it was probably the first experience of, wow, I can be fully integrated because I'm Hungarian, American. So I was like interacting in Hungarian with people at the school, but also in English, and teaching, which is like, I feel like I'm the most myself when I'm teaching. I can be a Christian and teach Christianly. And if I need to discipline students, I can use the gospel and actually address sin instead of just, taking away recess or whatever. But we're having these gospel conversations because students are misbehaving instead of just, I taught at a public school before in the US, and it just felt so like, I know you need Jesus is the issue here, but I can't say that. And so for me, like just being able to teach in a completely integrated way where biblical integration and Christianity and everything goes hand in hand, and it's expected. It's not just and encouraged. It's not just this like, oh yeah, just share a Bible verse, at the beginning of class. But it's like totally, how can we integrate this completely with what we're doing? So that's really exciting for me to think through.
Yeah, I would second that about the staff. I think I taught in a public school in the UK for 3 years before coming to Hungary, and there was some great teachers that were very inspiring. There was also a lot of teachers who, as soon as they would come in the break room, they'd be just ranting about the students and just really calling them waste of space, and I don't know, just everything like that. And granted, it was a very challenging school to work at that I was at, but I feel like the teachers at the school really care for the whole student, and we're not perfect by any means, but I really do feel like the staff care and work hard and want the best for the students, and we really do have some great students. It's a school; it doesn't come without challenges, but definitely I look forward to working at the school. It doesn't feel like a chore to go there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If I understand correctly, ICSB has had some unique ministry opportunities and has actually grown and adapted a little bit in the past few years with current events. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what that's looked like?
Yeah, so I think just with the war in Ukraine occurring, we've had a lot of Ukrainian students and students coming from Russia as well, fleeing because of the war. And actually, previously we had a basketball tournament where we had invited some schools long before anything happened. Well, I guess Ukraine tensions have happened, been occurring for a long time, but we had the basketball tournament set up. And so we had students from Moscow and students from
St. Petersburg, Kyiv.
Yeah. But they had all come to ICSB for their basketball tournament at certain points. And so when the war broke out, many of the students knew immediately that ICSB would be a good home for them, that it was similar to their previous Christian international experience. And so we started accepting a lot of students. I haven't been back in school teaching since that crisis, but Chris has had a lot of Ukrainian students, refugees, missionary families. Um, yeah, so you can talk better about that.
Yeah, I think it has been really cool, and I can't relate to what they've been through. You know, these students have been through a lot. I think especially Ukrainian students, you know, who they hear of kind of, I don't know, the destruction of their home country. I can't fathom that. So yeah, I can remember one student just a couple months into school, he was just saying he didn't want to be here. His home was Ukraine, and he didn't want to be here. And he only had 1 year at ICSB, but you know, as much as possible, we tried to make them feel accepted and welcomed and part of the community. Some of them really struggle with that. You know, they don't want to be there. But I just think of one other student in particular. Um, he was talking to me about a very strong guy, very physical. He was talking at one point about maybe going back to Ukraine because he wanted to fight in the war, but his mum didn't want him to go, and so he was weighing that up, and so it's a crazy thing that they go through that, but we get to educate them and disciple them, see them at school, and in the end, this guy actually got baptized in May of this year, just before he finished school. He's staying in Hungary to do university, so it's cool to be a part of that. It's just kind of an opportunity that came right into our lap, just out of nowhere. Really. So,
and it came at a really interesting time. Our school was at a bit of a crossroads where a lot of missionary organizations were moving out of Hungary, and so we were a little bit concerned that we were going to lose some of, ICSB was established to serve missionary families primarily. And so when we were at this crossroads, we were thinking, okay, are we going to just be a Christian school in name, but open it up to mostly non-Christian families? And how is this going to work? And then we had a massive influx of missionary families from Ukraine and Russia. So we've just had a massive influx of missionaries. And that has really changed the ethos of the school, actually, at a turning point where it was feeling like, yeah, the teachers are Christian, but it's not so cool to be Christian if you're a student. Like it felt like we were really fighting for that Christian ethos to remain. And it felt almost like students against teachers, or that even Christianity was kind of a minority or the uncool thing. And suddenly God just blessed us with a bunch of families who were on fire for the Lord, who came with their kids who were on fire for the Lord, and who saw what it meant to make true sacrifices. I don't know. We always talk about how somehow serving in Hungary just feels very cushy compared to, some other schools and some other places in the world. So, yeah. So it's been encouraging to see God use such a horrendous thing like war to still bless and work out his good plan.
It's so interesting to hear the ways you're serving through the school. And I'm curious to kind of go back and hear your stories, like the calling to go and serve through education. And I know you both came singles separately and you met there. So just hearing individual stories, I think would be really, really interesting to hear kind of what called you to go serve in a school. Chris, you mentioned that you had been a teacher before coming. So I'm curious, when you first heard about the opportunity to serve through education, serve as a teacher in a missionary kind of context.
Yeah, so for me, I was born and raised in Pakistan, lived there for the first 10 years of my life. The missionary school that I attended in Pakistan, I loved it there. It was very sad when we left, but we had to leave a little bit for my sister. She had some educational difficulties, so yeah, we went to the UK. My dad was from the UK. My mum was from New Zealand. So we went to the UK, and I struggled quite a bit, actually, just fitting into the culture. It took me many years before I felt settled there. But I think I went into teaching with the idea in mind that I would love to teach at a school like Murray that I'd had in Pakistan. And so I went into teaching with the idea that, I could use this anywhere in the world. So I think I had that heart and that passion to go out and teach. I knew that it wouldn't happen straight away. So that was kind of it. And I think just my third year of teaching in the UK. That was where God started to open doors. I began to explore a little bit, perhaps some opportunities, and Budapest was one of the ones that came up that said that they needed a math teacher. So that was the year that I came. Wouldn't say it was anything spectacular. I think it was kind of a slow sort of moving towards this is the right place, that God was guiding me to. So yeah, I'd done some short-term mission trips in Romania, and so Europe was somewhere that was on my heart, and so this was the place that in the end it worked out. It just doors were opening, and that's where I ended up. So yeah.
Chris, it sounds like there were a bunch of different factors that kind of came together. Like you said, it was a process over time. The experience you had um, as an expat child, and then your experience with short-term missions and training as a teacher. So those things coming together, we often hear there's these different threads that just sort of lead to one step at a time, identifying what's next. So um, that's so encouraging to hear how God was at work in directing your story. And meanwhile, Zoe, you also were considering this, but let's rewind a little bit for you. How did you hear about ICSB? What led you to considering missions? You've mentioned that you are Hungarian American, so how does all of that play into this?
My call was very, very clear and very shocking. Probably the most shocking thing I've ever had in my entire life. Um, so basically, I grew up visiting family in Hungary every summer while I was in the US. So I did all my schooling in the US, and I'd come here for summers to visit family and just kind of keep practicing the language and all of that. And I never in my wildest dreams would have thought to move here. And even in my family, everyone teases me because I was always moaning about missing America the whole summer and missing my friends and missing out everything. Um, and then I still wanted to do my student teaching abroad. So I had the opportunity, I went to Grace College, had the opportunity to do a chunk of my student teaching abroad, and we could choose where that would be. So I thought, okay, it'd be fun if I just explored Hungary and what that was like and looked around at different schools. And actually, my cousin was driving literally just past the school and was like, oh, what about that school on this road? And so we applied there, all the doors were closed, and finally there was like one shred of hope, and I ended up there. And I did all my stuff in middle school, which I never wanted to teach middle school. I always wanted to teach second grade, and alas, God laughed. And then I did my student teaching there. I thought, wow, that's really nice. It was a nice, quaint little school, back to public school in America. Zero desire to teach at a Christian school. God has me in public school. That's where I'm supposed to be. And I was sharing my faith with my students in the US because they wanted to know things about my life. And God was working on having me just be quiet in the car. I was always listening to music. I was always blasting things. And I was driving to see a friend, was on this long road trip and saw her. She said, okay, like, I just don't see you teaching in small town Indiana for the rest of your life. Like, God has created you to be this person between countries. Why are you in small town Indiana? And I was like, well, that's where he has me. And she's like, well, what about that school in Hungary? And I said, no, God's not calling me to be a missionary as far as I know. And I was like, if he wants to have that go that way, then he can let me know. So I get in the car and I'm driving the 5 hours back. And of course, without radio, because God told me to be quiet. And I just hear my name in Hungarian. He said, Zoe. And then I can't even say it in Hungarian because I never learned scripture in Hungarian. But basically it was, since when are earthly treasures more important than heavenly treasures? And I knew, like, for me, it was this money thing of like, I don't know how to raise support. And that's not something God is calling me to. And immediately I knew that was God saying, you're going to ICSB, like, you're doing the whole thing. And then he followed it up in English, like, same drive, a couple minutes later, you have 1 year. And like, literally, like, a year later, I was at 90% support raised and I was going to Hungary. So it was truly like this shocking, I don't know, I can count on one hand the number of times I've heard God speak to me in a way that was so it was just crazy. So for me, it was, I was the most surprised, and I was sharing with like my friends or this person or that person. And they were all like, "Oh, of course, this makes total sense. Yeah, Zoe and Hungary. Yeah, absolutely." And I was like, "Why am I the last person being told about this?"
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think for me it was not. It was kind of everything leading up to it that was so obvious to everyone else, and to me, it was I was the last person to realize what was happening.
That's so interesting and amazing to see how the Lord was working in all of those life experiences also, but then you had this moment that was more an obvious like this is it. And wow, between the two of your stories there are these pieces that come together, but also different ways that we get confirmation that this is what I'm supposed to do. Zoe, what happened after that moment in the car? Like, what did it look like to be obedient to that? You have 1 year. That's an ultimatum. So what did it look like to take the next steps?
I think, anytime you hear the voice of God, you have
Mm,
this time of like, okay, did that really happen? Was that just
yeah.
me? Which I know it was so helpful that he said those things in Hungarian about earthly treasures and heavenly treasures, because I knew that that wasn't something like even right now, if I were to sit here, my own brain would be like hemming and hawing about how to make it up. So I knew that that wasn't my own brain. Um, I told my really close friends at the time, um, who both have since moved. One has moved to Budapest and one Romania with Teach Beyond. So it was kind of fun domino effect. But um, yeah, I knew I needed accountability because in the past I felt God prompting me to do things and I've kind of delayed and waited until pretty much like, did that even happen? Did God even ask me to? I don't, well, whatever. And I was like, no, I know that this was God and I know this needs to happen. So I think it was really, really hard telling my family because that was just a different, you know, that's, it's totally different to say the way life as we know it is going to change completely. Um, Everybody wants to know how long you're going, and I didn't have
Mhm.
that information.
Yeah.
Um, so I couldn't say I'm going for 2 years and we'll see what happens. Like I didn't, even just hearing that, I think people feel better if they know, oh, you're going for 2 years and then you won't, and then you'll come back. But I didn't even have that clarity. So I didn't go for 2 years. I just went, and so did he. So that's why we're together. Uh, um, so yeah, I think just letting people know and having that accountability and making steps toward it, but just contacting Teach Beyond. I looked into different mission agencies because I knew I need to be at ICSB. I don't know how I'm going to get there. Some people, they're more like, I'm sold out on Teach Beyond. Now send me wherever. And for me, it was like, I'm sold out on ICSB. Get me there ASAP. Or I have a year, guys.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I think.
Yeah, you had the clarity of where you were going, and
Mhm.
not everyone has that, but
Mhm.
that's great that you had that. Well, we've alluded to the fact that you came as singles, individuals not knowing each other at all, then met at ICSB and have since added to your family while you're serving there in Hungary. So, can you talk to us about the experience of um, bringing cultures together in your home, living cross culturally, raising children in another country? Which may feel like a second home for you, Zoe, with the
Mhm.
extended family there, but certainly is far from your immediate family, your parents.
Mhm.
So, yeah, talk to us about that experience.
Well, I think it's amazing, really. I sometimes say I feel sorry for our kids because they're going to be so confused. Just the differences between British and American English, and then speaking Hungarian as well. I don't know. They're gonna be very confused, but it's awesome as well. I think both Zoe and I are third culture kids, and so I think we've always just been raised in these different cultures, and it's great to be able to speak with our kids in English, and then Zoe will speak with them in Hungarian, and we can relate to the international people here, the missionaries here who have kids, and we can also, to some extent, I think, relate to the Hungarian families. I think sometimes that's a challenge for me because I'm not proficient. I can speak in Hungarian, I'm not proficient. Um, that there's sometimes a language barrier, but it's very cool to be able to have kids that can speak both languages and just operate that way.
I think we've always seen things as, how can we, God has given us so many passports between us, and how can we maximize that for His glory? And, trying to make decisions on how can we keep the most doors open for ourselves and for our kids, than to start closing doors and saying, well, we can only ever live here, or we can only ever do this, or let God close the doors instead of us trying to fit in one place or another. I think being a TCK, you learn very quickly that there are huge blessings and there are huge challenges of, you have a heart that's in a million places and you wish you could be in a million places at once and you can't. So, already talking to our 3-year-old about, like, it was so special to spend that time with your cousins, and you had so much fun. We won't be seeing them very soon, or like, just, and sometimes your heart just breaks a little bit when you say things like, they're playing so well with your best friend's kid, and they're like, will I see them, next week? And it's like, no, you won't. And you won't see them next month or next year. Like, we don't know when we'll see each other next, but I'm glad you had a really good time today. And so I think that's a really hard thing, but hoping to help our kids be resilient and see the blessings that come about, and ultimately just being reminded of the fact that our citizenship is in heaven. And so the less we're tied down, I don't know, God taught me a lot about the Levites as well. Like, they weren't given a chunk of land because their inheritance was the Lord. And the idea that when we're not tied down to a specific, like, this is home, this is where I need to be to feel perfectly like myself, it actually frees us up to say yes to God and to obey Him wherever that is, and to just be more tied to heaven than to earthly things. So I think that's definitely something that I want to be drawing attention to as I raise my kids. And obviously that's a little more intense for a 3-year-old to understand at this point, but just an ongoing conversation.
For our weekly spotlight, we are focusing on the International Christian School of Budapest. If you want to learn more about ICSB or serving in Hungary, visit the Teach Beyond Opportunity Board at teachbeyond.org/go.
And now back to our conversation with the Fletchers.
You referenced kind of when you first went over there, people were asking how long, and you couldn't say like 2 years. You kind of just were going over indefinitely. Both of you said that in your own situations. And then as you've gone through all these different changes in your life, getting married, having kids, I feel like those are all times when people might ask, like, okay, are you going to come home now? Or like whatever they might say. Or you may be in your head or thinking, like, is this a time? So I'm curious what you kind of have thought through as those transition times have come that have kept you on the field.
I remember initially when I got engaged, I had a lot of students ask me, so are you going back now? And I said, back where? Like, Mr. Fletcher's
Right.
from England. And they're like, oh. And so it was just this realization of, like, this is our, like, where we met. This is where our story is. We got married here, because there is no back for us individually. Like, we just spent 3 weeks in the US, 3 weeks in the UK, but it didn't, it wasn't like, obviously we need to be in one place or the other. It's like Hungary is that middle ground. And actually just now we were looking into laws and things, and we're like, Hungary is the only place we can even live. And we've tried to keep things open, but, like, Chris isn't American. I'm not British. Our kids aren't British for some reason. That's complicated. But, like, so Hungary is just where God has us. And He'll let us know if it's not. But, He'll give us plenty of time. I know that He'll say, you have 1 year.
1 year, right?
And I'm like, God will tell me if things need to change. So
yeah.
I feel like I'm talking about.
Yeah, but I would back up what Zoe says. I can't really add more than that. It's our middle, Hungary's our middle ground, and so yeah, we're really lucky to have family in the UK and the US. But yeah, Hungary is, for now, the way it's worked out is God has made this our home.
You guys sound pretty confident of this, which is great, which is wonderful. But as you talk to them, maybe your extended family, as you saw them for 3 weeks in the summer, how do you navigate those conversations?
I think from my perspective, I think both my dad and my mum it's a very similar thing, actually. Dad came from England, mum came from New Zealand, and they met in Pakistan and got married. and so that was the case for both of them, and both of their parents lived a long way from us. So they did the same thing, and I think they totally understand. And the way that we talk about it, the way we see it is, we have these times in the year, either they'll come to visit us or we'll go to visit them. And those times are just really special. There'll be a week or 2 or 3, and we can spend, a lot of time with each other, and then we'll go back, and that's the way we get to spend time with them. So yeah, it's not an every week thing, like a meal here, or something here. Yeah, babysitting, which we'd love that, but it's not like that. But it is like, oh, here's a really special time that we get to spend, and that's the way they did it as well in Pakistan. So yeah, they've been very supportive, very understanding, and I'm sure probably both sets of parents would love to have us closer.
But even that is harder. Like, how do you swing that? So yeah, I think it's been certainly hard for my family, and my brother and his family live in the same small town as my parents. And so it just feels like, well, obviously the people that are missing here are Zoe and Chris and their family. But at the same time, my mom has her mom here, and she's an only child. And so she's in this care role, and she spends a lot of time out of the year flying back and forth trying to care for her mom. But when she's not here, we're the ones who are, I'm there almost every day, checking in on her and making sure she's okay. And we've realized it's been like almost 10 years since I moved here, and initially I lived with her for 2 years before getting married to Chris. And she would not still be alive if I hadn't moved. She had 2 grandkids, they both were in the US. So again, I think my family recognizes that, especially with her being in the state that she is, it's very good that I'm here. Obviously, when she passes, I think the conversations will start to open up again. But and again, just knowing that, like, just because we're here now, and just because we don't see that there's any chance that we're moving home in the foreseeable future, doesn't mean that we're not going to, or that God won't send us somewhere. So I think just being open to God's call, and being flexible, and also putting down roots and not just waiting for when is he going to tell us to go somewhere else, because then you spend a lifetime doing
that putting down roots and staying open-handed and flexible is a hard place to navigate, like wanting to make sure that you're not just flighty, but also not so anchored that you're not ready to go if he asks you to do something new. So I really appreciate that perspective of intentionally putting down roots and staying open to what the Lord might ask for the next season.
I think it's helpful, in that international Christian school cycle of, like, every fall we get asked, like, what are your plans for next year? And
right.
Beyond asks. So it's this built-in check-in, versus if I was working any other job, I feel like people wouldn't be checking, like, hey, are you still here next year? But with teaching, like, we have to know so we can hire the people. So it gives us this intentional time to kind of pause, pursue, pray, like, what are we doing? Are we still here? Yeah, okay. Or, I'm feeling some unrest here. Let's pray through it and see what needs to happen. So
as we've talked and kind of as you shared your story, I'd be curious if you, as you look back at your story of where God has taken you, is there anything you'd want to go back and tell your past self? So, like, with the perspective you have now, is there anything you wish your younger self had known, that you could go back and tell them?
I don't know. I feel like when I made the decision to come here, I don't know if it was brave or stupid or reckless, maybe all of those things. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I felt that tug and I felt that call, and I was obedient. I wanted just to be obedient to God. I was in this sort of stage of life where I felt like God was calling me to greater obedience. And I remember a quote about, as a cricket player turned missionary called C.J. Studd, who said, if God died for me, then then no sacrifice I can make is too great for him. So I don't know, maybe even I'd switch it the other way around. Maybe I could learn more from myself 10 years ago than now. I think when you get older, when you have kids, you can kind of become maybe less reckless. Maybe that's a good thing, but less obedient. I think God calls us to a radical life. I think, yeah, there's good things in the routine and the comfortable, but now with kids, maybe there's more responsibility, there's less flexibility, but even just don't be afraid of living radically for God, whatever that would look like. And I'm sure it looks different now for me than it did back then. But it can be very small things such as a conversation here or a decision there. I think it would be that is don't be afraid to be radical.
Yeah, I think for me, obviously leaving my family was the hardest part. And I mean, of course, like my life in the US and just everything that I worked toward and then kind of starting over. And I remember the first night at my grandma's and like pulling the sheets up and smelling that childhood summer smell of the sheets and thinking, I have made a terrible mistake. Like, I have no friends here, just have my grandma and like some cousins, and that's it. And like, I've uprooted my life, and like all these people have sent me. And it was that like the couple days between school starting and like the school community kicking in and just being like, I'm here with my grandma for the foreseeable future. So that was something that God spoke to me about before leaving. He just said, I'm building you a family, which was another like huge promise. And like looking back, I'm like, whoa, okay, like literally he was building me a family. I just thought like he meant, that I'd have a grand old time with my cousins over here and that they would become like really close family to me. But I think like quote that I have is the cost is great, but you are worth it. And to remind myself that God asks a lot of us, like that radical obedience, but it is worth it. He's worth it. And so I think I too am at this place of like the radicalness of moving your life abroad is no longer so radical. Having kids and like getting married, having kids, like those are big life changes, but it's just like the next step. So now my kid is going to preschool and it feels like a really big thing, but at the same time, it's like everybody's doing it. It's life. Your kid keeps moving. And so just praying into like, okay, but what does the cost look like now? Like, how can I be bold for faith, not at ICSB where it's comfortable and everyone expects it, but over at our preschool or with my neighbors that I'm like, sometimes I'm too shy to even say hello to. Like, what am I doing? Like I'm bold enough to move overseas, but like, heaven forbid that I would engage with the person living above me for the past 7 years, So just thinking and feeling convicted about that, and God putting people in my path that kind of have open doors, and like another mom who lives in my building who's very timid and wanting to know like, how come you're so confident? Like, I can see you have faith, like in what and how and what. So like having these conversations that I feel like God is just throwing at me, like, so what are you going to do with this? Because you're not teaching anymore. And I feel really bold when I'm teaching, but when I'm just like at home with kids, I'm like, I don't know, just living life, day to day, moment by moment. So
Well, as we're wrapping things up here, can you share with us a quick story about one way you've seen the impact of reaching the nation specifically through education?
I think again, just mentioning the Ukraine war, I do really feel like, yeah, that's just opened so many doors with the Ukrainian students coming in and just being able to minister to those families. I think sometimes we don't always see everything that goes on, but I do feel like it's an immense privilege to be able to teach the kids of missionaries. I think a lot of them, they're traveling or they've got big ministries, and they're doing things that maybe seem more radical than teaching. They're ministering to lots of parts of Hungary or Europe, and so it's a great privilege to be able to to say to them, hey, like it's a pleasure to teach your kids and to teach them, yeah, Pythagorean theorem, but then let's talk about what it means to listen according to the Bible, what it means to I don't know, love your family, or
Be
whatever, be a good man. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think of. So yeah, it's great. I think education, I went in to be a teacher because I knew that education happens everywhere in the world, and I was wanting to go somewhere overseas, and so yeah, I think education just reaches places. So the Ukraine war is one thing, but just ministering to so many different nationalities and families, it's just every year it's such a cool thing that we get to do at the school.
I think also I had the opportunity to share at ICEC, which is the International Christian Educators Conference in Prague this past spring, about this new teacher induction program, which I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And they're like, please teach a seminar. I'm like, okay. So I like put together some stuff, and it was amazing. Just the principals and the directors of schools all over the world coming and saying, we don't have a program like this. We need it. I'm like, okay, I barely even have a program like to give you, but I have ideas. And one principal director I was sitting down with, brainstorming like, how can we build things in, and realizing that my little 2 hours a week, which felt like nothing, was actually being used, like those ideas and those things that, and it's not just my ideas, it's like our principal, our director, and we were working as a team to put together kind of a program for our new teachers. But just being faithful in those 2 hours was creating this ripple effect into countries all over the world, where at international schools, where sometimes it is primarily non-believers attending these Christian schools, or creative access countries or whatever, and just like amazing how one little bit is allowing these teachers and these directors to come away with saying, I know better how to support my teachers so that they can support their students, and just thinking like, okay, this information, these ideas, how they can spread, globally, which is really exciting. So I think just remembering that, you don't have to have so much, like you can have 2 loaves or 5 loaves and 2 fish, and
2 hours a week,
yeah,
right?
2 hours a week while having a
Yeah.
child at home and a team call, whatever, and
Right.
you can make it work. So
That's great. That's really great. And Chris, you've experienced the effects of others believing in education as something that they're called to do, right? When you were an MK receiving education in that setting. And so you've also experienced the power of reaching the nations through education as a student. And now you get to be part of pouring that out to your own students. I think that's really special too.
Thank you so much for joining us. We have one final question we ask all of our guests. So before we let you go, you just have to answer this one thing. And that's, what is one thing that's changing your life right now? So this can be a big question, a really big, serious thing, or something small. You're free to kind of take it whichever way you want, but just something that's changing your life. So I'll go first and then Heather will go. So you have a little bit of time to think about it. And mine is definitely on the lighter side. But it's something I've wanted to do for a long time, where when you go and change a light bulb, you're like, I think I changed this one too recently. Like it should have lasted longer. So I started putting the date that I replaced the light bulb on them. And it hasn't paid off yet, but I'm very optimistic that I will see like, oh, this light bulb actually lasted longer than I thought it did. Or, oh, something's wrong with this electricity thing going on because it burned out way too quickly.
Are you
So
using like a Sharpie marker right on the light bulb?
I'm using a Sharpie on the
Yeah,
base
that's
part.
great.
So we will
I
see.
can't wait for a report back, Kian. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, what's changing my life lately is a little bit different, and it's asking myself a question. I don't know if you guys do words of the year, but my word of the year this year is the word space. And I think I was encountering that, like, just there were a lot of days that I didn't have the space in my day that I thought I was going to have, and I was feeling like, well, this is a failure that I didn't do a good job creating that space, or, other things ate it up. And so I started asking myself the question, well, what does space look like now? And it was a lot more freeing. It has been a lot more freeing to then say, okay, with the time I have now, or with the, like, if something gets canceled now, I have different space available. So to just be able to stay more flexible and aware of the time that I do have, or the, people around me that are there. So that's been changing my life lately, a little bit different direction to go. What about you guys?
Well, I think for me, maybe this just shows that I'm just getting older, but I bought Zoe a yogurt maker for her birthday a few days ago. But I feel like I bought the gift more for me.
I eat the yogurt, but I feel
Zoe
extremely
loves this. Our girls love yogurt, and so she's making it all the time. And did some research. So I bought this yogurt maker, and so yeah, I've just made the first batch, and it seems to have turned out pretty well. But I don't know, I've been kind of like obsessive about it, and so it's cool. But yeah, it's just yogurt.
That's great.
That's wonderful.
You say that.
So no obligation to say that the yogurt maker is also changing your life.
Well, I've yet to try it, so it might be life-changing, but
yes.
I might just keep going back to Aldi brand. So I think for me, the change hasn't happened yet, but just with our oldest going to preschool, here in Hungary, preschool is mandatory from age 3, and initially I told Chris that was a deal breaker for me. Like, I did not want to live in Hungary if they were going to require my kid to go to preschool at age 3. And now we're here, and I guess it hasn't been a deal breaker. But just picturing like, whoa, I'm going to have a lot of time without her, but a lot of time with her little sister. And what am I going to do with myself? But actually, I'm not going to be as freed up as I feel like I'm going to be, because I still have a very busy 1-year-old. So just trying to think, like, that puts us in a lot of new social circles, and more of a schedule or routine. So I'm just curious, even just a couple months from now, what it's all going to feel like. And so I feel the change is coming, but I don't yet know how it's going to shake down. So.
Well, thanks so much, Zoe and Chris, for joining us for this conversation, for sharing in the midst of the changes you're experiencing as parents, as educators, just continuing to stay open to what the Lord's doing in your life, and knowing that telling the story that brought you to this point is still just part of the story, because there's more yet to come. So we're so glad to be serving with you in Teach Beyond, and to have you there in Hungary.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the opportunity. This has been really good to reflect. It's been really encouraging.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
That was such a powerful conversation. I loved hearing what they would tell their younger selves, and even Chris's answer that he would probably have more to learn from his younger self.
Yeah,
him teaching. I can totally relate to that feeling, being challenged to be as willing to take the same risk your younger self might have been willing to take.
For sure. And I love the reminder to keep staying open to what God has next, while also being rooted and planted right where you are, holding that tension. There are opportunities all around us to be part of what the Holy Spirit's doing, and we want to be aware of that, but also not just looking for the next thing all the time.
Absolutely. Chris, Zoe, Heather, and I serve with Teach Beyond, a mission organization reaching the nations through education.
Want to learn more and get involved? Visit teachbeyond.org or follow us on social media.
To help more people find the podcast and hear about Teach Beyond, we'd love it if you would leave a rating or review and share the show with a friend. Be sure you're subscribed or following the show on the platform where you listen, so you never miss an episode.
And as always, you can reach us at podcast@teachbeyond.org. We'll see you next week.